Britain has a forgotten past, but if you know where to look, you'll remember. When you're able to see into a lost world, you realise that although enchanting and mysterious, it's actually a very familiar place, holding an abundance of life and providing calm and comfort like few other habitats. Britain is a forgotten rainforest nation, but this is changing. In this video, we're going to the home of the 1000-Year Trust, the only UK charity dedicated to the protection and restoration of temperate rainforests, and they've had a very exciting and important progression in their story. They've put on a lot of growth. It's really great to be back here. So I'm here at Kabila. I'm actually here at the location of the 1000-Year Trust. This is a really special location for a number of reasons. As you can see around me, these are the early stages of a temperate rainforest regenerating, coming back up. Oh wow, this gate wasn't open last time. Looks like they've, even more trees going off out this way. Look at that. Off out here and down there and over there. And don't be fooled by the blue sunshine and the bright skies. This is a habitat this is an area which receives an awful lot of rain. Of course it does, because it is rainforest after all. It is getting the attention it deserves now, but it often comes to a surprise to most people that Britain has rainforest. But when you think about the amount of rain that we get in this country, you know, it really is no surprise. We are a rainforest people, but this is something that we've forgotten. But you're certainly reminded of it when you come here. I'm up on Kabila Tor. This is a great vantage point. You can see the rainforest the other side. You can hear the river down in the valley running. Oh, let's get down to that river and have a look. I can hear the river, very excited to get down there. I'm actually quite excited to get some water in this hair. I'm growing it, no mean comments about the hair please. I'm trying to get beyond the awkward stage right now. So these wet river valleys laden with trees are the ideal conditions for temperate rainforest to form, but it's really rare now. I mean, there's less than 0.4% of the UK which is covered in this habitat, and historically it was as much as 25%, a quarter of the country covered in rainforest. I mean, who really knows for certain? It likely could have been much more of Britain, and I like to think it was. But what is for sure is that these ancient Tolgi oak forests were hacked back by humans. The abbreviated demise of Britain's rainforests is that it began slowly, with Neolithic settlers making clearings for their unusual domesticated animals, and over the millennia which follows, a steady rot took hold. Whether if it was to make way for an empire-building wool trade or to fuel the fires of industrial revolution, by the 20th century Britain's rainforests were all but decrepit, isolated patches, fragments being stressed further by unprecedented levels of grazing, ingress of invasive trees, and urbanisation. And it's not just Britain's rainforests which have suffered. Throughout time and all over the world, we've seen the degradation of habitat and the loss of species. But at Leaf Curious, while we do face and acknowledge these problems, we also share solutions. And this is why I want to tell you about the brilliant rewilding organisation Planet Wild. These guys run a membership subscription, community funding, that unites regular people toward a common goal of making the planet wilder. If you've been following the channel over the past few months, you'll know I've been working with Planet Wild. They partner with some of the most innovative environmental organisations around the world that are working to create real and lasting impact. I'm a member myself, and I've been so impressed with the work that they're doing. They are scaling their membership now to I think well over 11,000 members globally. This is something which anybody can be a part of, no matter where you're from and no matter what you can contribute. What I really find special about Planet Wild is that you can see the work. Every month they release a new video on their YouTube channel, and it's such a diversity of different projects, you know, whether if it's restoring entire habitats or whether if it's working with new technologies to help species. What's always at the heart of their projects isn't just nature restoration, but it's also people, and I think that is so important when we're looking to actually make a meaningful impact to the planet. Their most recent mission is a perfect example of this, which saw the backing of Lion Lights, an ingenuitive solution created by Richard, who answered the age-old conflict between Kenyan cattle farmers and lions. By funding the installation of these lights, farmers can continue their way of life peacefully, and the lions' future is ensured. when we come together, when like-minded people come together to work towards a common goal, we're always going to do more. We're always going to achieve more. And it's organizations like Planet Wild which are facilitating this. And look, if you're unsure about signing up, then I do really recommend going and watching their channel. It's the best way to learn about them. But if you do want to sign up, I've got an exclusive offer for you. The first 150 people to sign up using the link in the description and in the comments, or the code that's on the screen now. There's also a QR code, you can go and scan that as well. If you do this, you will get your first month of membership paid for free. The first 150 people. Let's try and reach that number. That would be awesome. You know, this means you can start helping nature now and it won't cost you anything. I'm getting a really wet bum. I don't necessarily mind because this is a beautiful habitat. Let's continue. So we've got a little minute till we catch up with Merlin, but what I want to do here is in this little clearing where there's some light coming through, is I'm just going to lay back and take it in. You know, I don't spend enough time in temperate rainforest. You know, for someone who loves nature so much and wants to share it with so many people, you know, I feel like sometimes, you know, when I'm preoccupied with making films and videos, you actually don't get to spend that much time in nature. So I'm gonna make a better commitment now to just spend more time in nature in places like this. We're blessed with another great day.
What a day!
I know.
It was like this last time.
I know it was, wasn't it? Yeah, I was I was almost surprised.
This is Isabel. I literally only just
Hi, Isabel.
She was wandering around the fields.
Good.
She's an intern doing some work for us. The 1,000 Year Trust is the only charity in the UK dedicated to the protection and restoration of Atlantic temperate rainforests, and we sit in the heart of one of the largest and best preserved rainforests in the southwest, called the Kabila Valley, which is about 75 acres of temperate rainforest that's about 4,000 years old, and it's just a stunning sight to really get under the skin of what makes these habitats tick. And our charity, our mission is to try and triple the amount of rainforest growing across the UK over the next 30 years. We think there might be as much as about 300,000 acres across the whole of the western reaches of the UK, from the northwest of Scotland all the way down through the Highlands, through Cumbria and the Lake District, from Anglesey past Aberystwyth to Pembrokeshire, and then down in the southwest, places like Exmoor, Dartmoor, Bodmin, the Lisdon and West Penwith. And what we'd like to do is start to see that return to a little bit of its former glory. The reason we really want to do this is because at our charity and many other charities, beautiful partners of ours like the National Trust, the Wildlife Trust and the Woodland Trust, we're all passionate about the fact that Atlantic temperate rainforests are one of our absolute pinnacle habitats in the UK for carbon sequestration. They suck in more CO2 than anything else we can grow, for biodiversity abundance at a time that we are one of the most nature depleted country in Europe. Nothing restores all of the layering of life that we should see than rainforests. But I always think, from a personal level and also from our charity's perspective, most importantly, they're one of the best habitats in the UK for the mental health and well-being of the humans who spend time amongst them. But we need to study this more deeply. So from very early on, I was really struck by all of the different scientists, all of the different universities that wanted to come and collaborate with us. And I realized how little opportunity there was within the educational sector and the academic sector to access healthy examples of temperate rainforest, to be able to study them, to be able to do long-form, multi-year, multidisciplinary programs on this habitat, which is so important. And I began to realize, the more I spoke to academics, that you know, if you're a young conservation scientist and you want to make your career in rainforests, it's almost certain that you're going to do that in tropical rainforests. And that makes sense because there's 99% more of them than there are temperate rainforests. But there's also hundreds of universities with dedicated courses, research institutes that provide millions of dollars of funding every year, and field stations in tropical rainforest environments in the Amazon or Borneo or Colombia, where you can go as a young scientist, you can get into these habitats, you can stay in them in a residential capacity, you can join projects and expeditionary teams, you can contribute to peer-reviewed papers, and you can shift government policy and societal opinion of these habitats. And that is why, when all of us have been growing up and at school, we learn a lot about tropical rainforests. It's because they've been well studied and well researched. If a young conservation scientist wants to make their career in Atlantic temperate rainforests, there isn't a single university course, a single research institute giving funding, or a single research station across the entire European seaboard, from Bergen in southwest Norway to Braga in northern Portugal and anywhere in between, where you can stay and actually learn and study and be a part of understanding these habitats. So our next big project at the 1,000 Year Trust is that we are building Europe's first Atlantic temperate rainforest research station here on Bobbin Moor, which is pretty much the middle point of the Atlantic temperate rainforest range, the bioclimatic envelope. And this will be a home for scientists, academics, the local community, volunteer groups, to be able to have a safe residential research site where they can step off into this habitat and actually do this work.
If you want to support and follow the 1000 Year Trust, I have left a link to their website in the description of this video. But for now, Merlin and I are going to walk, talk and answer the questions from the Leave Curious members over on Patreon. So I asked the Leave Curious members what they wanted to really know about this habitat and about the project. And Robbie Bennett asked, how quickly can these habitats regenerate and where in the UK are these projects feasible?
So that's two questions, and they're great questions. So to take the first one about how quickly they can regenerate, we've called our charity the 1000 Year Trust with a real obvious purpose to that name, and it's because the paramount species in Atlantic temperate rainforest in the UK tends to be the sessile oak, the Celtic oak, and that's a 1000-year creature, so it's got a 1000-year lifespan of a full cycle. So the short answer is it can take up to 1000 years, but we have areas here at Kabila that were taken out of traditional farming 30 years ago that have become really healthy temperate rainforests now. So I'd say the window is anything between 30 years to 1000 years, and part of the work of our charity is trying to use research to understand how we can accelerate the process, how we can make it closer to 30 years. All the planting we're about to walk past here that we've done in the last 2 years, 100,000 trees that are being established at the Kabila site, all in a rainforest pattern, and they're being planted with intention to try and make sure that we can sort of slightly leapfrog some of the stages of that process and get to mature temperate rainforest sooner.
Cool.
Well, he had a second question.
Oh, he did, didn't he?
Around where these projects are feasible.
Yes, of course, yeah.
So it all comes down to hydrology, and really for the kind of epiphyte growth, the lichens and the bryophytes and the epiphytes up in the canopy that you find in temperate rainforests, you need these hyperoceanic climates, which tend to have about 1400 millimeters of rain throughout the year, and it can't all fall in one big monsoon season. It all has to fall in a staggered approach across the year. So you need 1400 millimeters a year, and that needs to fall in a consistent way across the 12 months, which really bounds you to the western sort of quarter of the UK. Although there are some areas which, because of topography, because of the way the land lies, you can get rainforest in more eastern areas as well, but mainly it's those western areas.
Well, kind of in tune with that question, in line with that question, Nick asked, I would be interested to know the challenges of translocating epiphytes, and really, is it even possible, and how would you go about it? Should you go about it, or should you let these things form? I mean,
I had a long call about exactly that subject this morning with our research directors who were on your last video, Rob, Enya and Harrison.
Yes,
And we've got some funding from an amazing organisation who are supporting on exactly this kind of research. So on our research station roof, it's going to have a living roof that's going to be an epiphyte growing laboratory of its own, using innovative technology like ropes, in the way that you can grow seaweed on ropes, and other structures that you can figure out how we do that, because it's really difficult to grow epiphytes and then to translocate them onto younger trees. And a lot of organisations have had a lot of trouble with this and not much success. We want to really get to the nub of that question. Yeah. Is it possible? Is it a good idea? And how can we do it in a sustainable and successful way?
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's what you think about when you come to a rainforest. So if there's a way of accelerating that process, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so Anton asked, he says, I'm interested to understand the administrative structure that will protect the land for generations. He says, I'm a Maori by heritage and have seen trusts come and go over time. So how are we going to make sure that, this land stays temperate rainforest?
I mean, that's a huge question, a huge issue. And I also think a really exciting one, which in the UK we're starting to really work through around what land ownership structures should look like, what right to roam and public access should look like, how we reduce the inequality of access to land, especially with an increasing urban population. So that's a huge question, and one that I'm personally really passionate about, increasing the access that people have to these habitats whilst also making sure the habitats are protected and restored at the same time. We've seen sites where, because there's totally unfettered public access perhaps, and people haven't really been informed upon how fragile these habitats are, there has been some damage, and I want to make sure that doesn't happen here. The short answer to the question, I think, is that it does involve trusts. So I would like to see the Kabila rainforest and all of this land come into public ownership. I think that more land should be in public ownership and be owned by charities like the National Trust, the Woodland Trust and the Wildlife Trust, organisations that will protect it for longer periods than just one lifetime. I used to joke about how my father protected Kabila for the last 60 years, I'll protect it for my 60 years, and my children will protect it for the next 60 years. And my wife pulled me up on that and said, if you try and put that burden upon them, then it's guaranteed they won't be interested in it at all.
True,
and I don't want them to feel that burden. I want them to feel free to be able to do whatever they want with their lives, but I want to know that the project that we've started here will continue for hundreds of years, and I think the best way to do that is within the charity structure in the UK.
Okay, so tomorrow I'm going to go see Coombshead. We're running Coombshead with Derek and all the great work they're doing to sort of bring back animals.
He's a great friend and a great man.
Yeah, and Jim Lord from the members area has asked, okay, let's read this. My question is, rather that it is combined with the Coombshead, my question is, can this be combined with the Coombshead project so that the long lost fauna could thrive with the new fauna? And he's very pleased with himself because he managed to use the words flora and fauna in the same sentence.
So Derek and I always partner whenever we can. He sourced our beavers for us for our beaver project, and we're working with him on the wildcat and the pine marten reintroduction programs, which are running across Exmoor, Dartmoor and Bodmin Moor, to try and bring them back across that corridor of uplands in the southwest. I think that wherever we can create, the answer to everything is making nature bigger, better and more joined up, the Lawton report, and using also the American conservation model of cores, corridors and carnivores. Nothing can happen in isolation. All of these rainforests that we currently have in the UK are effectively island habitats, and island habitats are always under risk, both genetically and just spatially, because they will shrink rather than grow. So wherever we can, we need to join up, and I would love to see a corridor connecting what Derek's doing across the border in England, as we say down here in Cornwall, with what we're doing down here, and all of the other amazing projects which are also doing really inspirational work in between and to either side of us. So yeah, I'm a big fan of that, and thank you, Jim, for asking that question.
Yeah, that's a great question. On my trip here, I'm going to be going over to take a look at Dartmoor as a potential area for sort of, I guess because like a big part of what you're doing is you're using this space as a model, right, to show surrounding landowners how we can move away from some pretty destructive land management practices towards something which, works with the environment, works with, still farming sheep and all the rest of it. How much success have you found with this, and how's that journey been?
So Kabila is designed as a blueprint site. We are a medium-sized upland hill farm. We're about 240, 250 acres, of which quite a lot is actually woodland, so it's not farmed. It's about 160 acres of farmland. The average size of farm in the UK is about 220 acres, so we sit nicely within that category of an average-sized farm. The UK has to use its land for a number of different things. There are 5 key areas. We need to produce food for everybody in the UK. We need to grow timber as a timber crop. We need to restore nature and fight climate change. We need to provide spaces for people to live and enjoy. And I've only done 4, and there's definitely 5. But we need to have land. We need to have a land use strategy that covers all types of things that we do in the UK. And what I want to provide here is a blueprint for upland farmers to say, traditionally, we farmed sheep and a little bit of cattle on these landscapes. The average upland hill farmer on Bodmin Moor and Dartmoor takes between 85 and 93% of their annual income from European subsidies at the moment. These subsidies are going. This is changing.
When is that changing?
So it's sort of a slow removal of these subsidies, and 2028 is the final year that they'll be paid, the basic payment scheme. And so farmers are all having to look quite hard at how they manage their land and try and figure out a new financial model. Our argument here is that you can have a more resilient financial model on an upland hill farm by farming rainforest and restoring rainforest, because you have carbon opportunities, biodiversity net gain opportunities, ecotourism, conservation grazing with direct to consumer meat. That is a better model than chucking on sheep and claiming a subsidy for it, and usually burning the wool and exporting the lamb, which is what tends to happen with a lot of what happens on this land. And so if we can prove that model, which we can prove, then hopefully that will start a movement where other farmers, our neighbours and other farmers around us, will do the same thing, and will realise that this is a better thing to do with their land than what has been done since the Second World War.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to just do these things, but if you can just do it and sort of lead by example in a way and just have the proof, you know.
It's got to be financially resilient. It's got to make sense, because farmers, you know, on the uplands especially, they're not making huge amounts of money from their land. They want to keep their families in their homes. They want to have security for the next generation, for the future. I believe that in rainforest landscapes like Bobbin Moor, Dartmoor, Exmoor, you can have a better farming model by restoring rainforest than you can under more traditional farming practices that are based just on grazing.
Awesome, yeah. It's good. You've done well. You've done well to like keep the flow going whilst you're.
I do this a few times a day. We'll go back down here.
So one of the first things Merlin did here was reintroduce beavers down in the valley bottom, which you know, are one of these keystone species that pack a really good punch in terms of ecosystem function. And we've got farmers and neighbouring landowners on both sides of our river. Half the side said, you know, love what you're doing, really into the restoration work, and you know, we really like beavers, so how can we explore that as well? The other side said, if we see a beaver on our land, we will shoot it. And I think that kind of encapsulates the two sort of arguments you get at a lot of these things. There's always extreme versions at both ends, but I think, you know, a lot of people also do sit in the middle. But it's got to come from bottom up and top down as well. You know, the government is still kind of behind in terms of their policy landscape, in terms of incorporating nature into farming. For so long, you know, forestry and agriculture have been two separate disciplines. You know, you put a wall between the fields, and this is very much woodland and that's very much agriculture. But I think now it's very much an emerging field, and we're starting to see the benefits of agroforestry, and that, you know, these two things can work together, and you can have trees and also cattle in a landscape, which is what this system will be in 5 to 10 years time, when the trees have grown a little bit and then they can handle livestock in. So we're at that sort of nurturing phase at the moment, in this first 5 years, where, you know, the deer guards are on, and we've really got to help these trees get going.
Your job specifically is like the communications, right? That kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly. So we have quite a range of audience. You know, we first want to tap into people who are unaware that temperate rainforests even exist in the UK. But then as well, you know, there's people like myself and like Al who are fundamentally just big nerds for trees. And we really want to see the array of different microhabitats, all the way from the bryophytes to the fungus to the lichens. And when it comes to diversity in the UK, there really isn't anywhere that resembles the temperate rainforest.
Part of the work that we're doing here is, you know, working with local tree planting contractors, and we bring in volunteers into the landscape to help with a lot of the restoration work that we're doing. And it can just be a much more diverse model, from rainforest walks and helping people reconnect.
Get out the mud.
Yeah, out the mud.
You're in the mud.
But yeah, just helping people reconnect with these habitats that we've forgotten about. It's that point of cultural amnesia and shifting baseline syndrome. You know, we grow up not really being in these woods anymore, but you know, back in the day we were rainforest people.
We were.
And I think we're slowly starting to remember, and that needle's shifting. So
one thing that does really blow my mind is the idea that at one point the British Isles were nearly covered with temperate rainforest. I think the current figures sort of suggest there's about a 20% coverage, and I just can't imagine the islands like this just completely natural.
Yeah.
And it's exciting to be part of the plans to kind of reintegrate that back into our culture and part of our identity.
I totally agree. We've literally forgotten that we've got this and that we were part of it, we lived in it. Yeah, you're really lucky to work here.
That's
for sure.
just about to say, people like ourselves, you know, where we can come and be part of this. We are part of a very small minority as well, but hopefully that changes, you know, and I do believe that as awareness grows, more and more people will get involved, and you know, like Al and Millen have explained, it can be quite a lucrative business model for landowners to really reconsider the posterity of their land use.
Yeah, people are motivated by money. That's the kind of underlying thing.
It is true, it is. But there's a very happy marriage to be made between profitability and
sustainability.
foresight. Sustainability, exactly.
Totally agree. You ever been for a swim?
Not here, but there's a lovely natural bath that we have down there.
Yeah, I've seen it, yeah. And the sauna too. I just want to say a huge thank you to the 1000 Year Trust for having me back, and please do head to the description to find out how you can get involved with them, Planet Wild, and of course, how you can support Leave Curious over on Patreon. For now, if you want to keep watching the channel, then please check out the video on the screen. But in the meantime, thanks for watching. Leave Curious.